a child not to come back in, but I had never let him inside. When Gareth Hume asked me to stay at his farmhouse for a fortnight, I honestly thought he was doing me a favor. I was 23, still renting a miserable little flat over a takeaway in Carlisle, and the idea of having an entire place to myself out in the fells sounded brilliant. Gareth wasn't family, not exactly. He was a mate of my dad's from years back, one of those men who always looked like he'd stepped out of bad weather, even when he was indoors. Quiet, polite, but not warm. The sort of bloke who thanked you properly while making you feel like you'd already disappointed him somehow. He said he had to go down to London because of a family situation and didn't want the house sitting empty. Pipes could freeze, foxes got into the bins, deliveries needed bringing in, that kind of thing. Nothing dramatic. He said it the way people say ordinary things. And that was probably why I agreed so quickly. Free run of a proper old farmhouse. No neighbors pressed up against the wall, no traffic outside, no shouting from the kebab shop downstairs at 2 in the morning. Just a quiet place, snow on the hills, and a break from everything. The only thing that felt odd was how many instructions he gave me before he handed over the keys. He stood beside his Land Rover with the engine running, snow blowing across the yard in thin, dry sheets, and pointed things out one by one as if he were briefing me for a job I wasn't qualified for. Boiler timer, fuse box, where the torch was kept, which windows stuck in the cold, which door swelled in damp weather. He told me not to leave food scraps outside because it brought animals in close. Fair enough. Then he told me to keep the curtain shut once it got dark, not just drawn halfway, shut. I remember laughing a bit and saying, "What are the sheep nosy round here?" He looked straight at me and said, "Just shut them, saves bother." That stayed with me even then, not because it was frightening on its own, but because of how quickly he said it. No smile, no explanation, just that. Then there was the byre. It sat a little way off the back of the house, attached by an old wall and half swallowed by shadow even in daylight. Stone-built, squat, with a corrugated roof gone black with age. One side of it had been boarded over from the inside. I only looked at it because Gareth caught me looking. "Don't go in there," he said. "What's in there? Nothing you need." Again, dead flat. No room for joking. He shoved the ring of keys into my hand and started pulling his gloves on. I should have left it there. Most people would. But something in me wanted him to either laugh and tell me he was winding me up or explain himself like a normal person. Instead, he just kept going. "And don't answer the back door after dark." I stared at him. Why would anyone be at the back door? He took a second too long to answer. Because people get turned around in weather like this. That could have been reasonable, I suppose. Lost walkers, someone with car trouble. But the way he said it made it sound rehearsed, like he'd had the line ready before I even asked. I told myself not to be stupid. Remote house, older man, set in his ways, probably just particular. The sort of person who made rules because rules made him feel in control. By the time his Land Rover disappeared down the narrow lane, rear lights shrinking into the white haze, I was already making excuses for him in my head. And, to be fair, for the first few hours everything did seem fine. Better than fine, actually. The farmhouse was bigger than I expected once I was inside on my own. Proper old place. Thick walls, low beams, floors that dipped in the middle as if they'd grown tired of holding people up. It smelled faintly of peat smoke and furniture polish, with that cold mineral smell old houses get in winter no matter how much heat you pump into them. Gareth had stocked the kitchen with enough food to outlast a siege. Bread in the freezer, tins in the cupboards, milk, eggs, bacon, stew in labeled tubs, even a bottle of whiskey on the counter with a note in blunt capital letters saying, "Help yourself, just not too much." That made me smile for the first time all day. I unpacked in the upstairs bedroom overlooking the lane. There was barely any signal on my phone, but enough to send a few messages. I put music on quietly, made tea, and walked from room to room, enjoying that strange feeling of being somewhere that didn't belong to you, but was, for the moment, entirely yours. Outside, the world was nearly colorless. White fields, gray sky, black lines of dry stone walls climbing the slope. It should have felt bleak, but at first it didn't. It felt peaceful. That's what unsettles me now, looking back. How peaceful it felt right before it didn't. It was almost dark by the time I noticed the first thing. I'd gone to the front window with my mug, mostly just watching the snow come down thicker over the lane, when I saw the tracks, a set of boot prints crossing the yard. At first I assumed they were mine and thought nothing of it, but mine led from my car to the front step and back once when I'd gone to fetch my bag. These were different, broader tread, deeper heel marks. They came from the side of the house, crossed the yard, and stopped at the back wall where the kitchen door was. I actually stood there for a few seconds trying to make them make sense. Gareth's? That was the obvious answer, except I'd watched him leave from the front, and I was nearly sure the yard had looked untouched after his Land Rover pulled off. Maybe I'd missed them. Maybe the light was different now. Maybe they were older and the wind hadn't filled them in yet. But they didn't look old. That was the problem. They had sharp edges, fresh impressions. Snow had gathered lightly in the bottoms, but not enough. They looked recent enough that whoever had made them could still be nearby. I remember putting the mug down very carefully on the windowsill. Not because I was panicking. Not yet. It was more like my body had gone cautious before my mind had caught up. I went through the house, checking each room with this stupid half smile on my face, like I'd laugh at myself the second I found the sensible explanation. Scullery, front parlor, downstairs loo, pantry, kitchen. Empty. I checked the back door, locked, bolted. Nothing strange there, except for one thing I only noticed because I bent closer to the glass. There were faint smears on the outside of it. Not proper handprints, just marks where something damp had brushed the pane, at a height that suggested fingers. My chest tightened a bit then, properly. Still not full fear, but that first cold shift where your thoughts stop moving in a straight line. I unlocked the door before I could talk myself out of it and opened it a crack. The cold hit me straight away, hard enough to sting my teeth. The yard behind the house was darker than the front, boxed in by the byre wall and a leaning row of bare hawthorn. Snow drifted low across the ground. No one there. No movement. No sound apart from the wind rubbing itself along the stonework. Then I looked down. The same prints were there, clearer from this side, coming right up to the back step. Not passing by. Not wandering. Coming directly to the door. And beside them, almost hidden under a thin dusting of fresh snow, was something else. A smaller mark. Too small for an adult boot. Not a clean footprint either, more like the front half of one, as if someone much lighter had stood on one foot and then been lifted away. I shut the door a bit too quickly and slid the bolt across. That was when I first had the thought I tried hardest to ignore. Maybe Gareth hadn't been warning me about the weather at all. I wish I could say I packed my things there and then and left, but that's not how people work when they're scared, in a quiet, half-embarrassed sort of way. I stayed because I kept finding reasons to stay. Because it was nearly dark, because the lane was icing over, because I didn't want to ring my dad and sound ridiculous, because there was probably a sensible explanation, and I'd feel like an idiot once I found it. All those weak little thoughts that seem reasonable right up until the moment something happens that you can't explain away. So I made dinner, heated one of Gareth's tubs of stew, forced myself to eat it at the kitchen table, and told myself to stop acting like a child. But even doing something as ordinary as eating, I couldn't stop listening. Every old house makes noise. Anyone knows that. Pipes tick, timber shifts, wind gets into odd gaps and makes a place mutter to itself. I knew all of that. Still, once I'd seen those tracks, every sound felt deliberate. The settling creak from upstairs, the faint knock from somewhere deep in the wall, the soft rattling tap against the back window when the wind got up. Each one made me stop with the spoon halfway to my mouth. At one point I was sure I heard footsteps above me. Not many, just 2 or 3. Slow ones. I sat there absolutely still, staring at the ceiling, stew going cold in front of me. I told myself the same thing again and again. Old house, old wood, wind, nothing else. But my body wasn't buying it. My shoulders had gone tight. My jaw hurt from clenching it. I could feel my own heartbeat in my throat, ridiculous and heavy. But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. That's the worst part, really. Fear doesn't always arrive all at once. Sometimes it pulls back and lets you feel stupid for being frightened, just so you drop your guard a little. I cleaned up, checked the front lock, then checked the back one twice. I drew every curtain in the house, same as Gareth had said, though I hated doing it because it made me feel cut off, as if I was choosing not to see what was outside rather than proving there was nothing there. Upstairs, I plugged my phone in beside the bed and noticed the signal had vanished completely. No bars, nothing. I stood there in the silence of that room, looking at the black window behind the curtain, and for the first time that day, I had the strong, stupid urge to get in the car and drive straight back to Carlisle, snow or no snow. I even picked up my keys. Then I heard it. 3 knocks, not at the front door, not even downstairs. From somewhere beneath me in the house, slow and spaced apart, as though someone had found the exact right place to make sure I'd hear it. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there with the keys in my hand, every bit of warmth gone out of me, listening to the silence that came after, and knowing with total certainty that whatever had made that sound had not done it by accident. I didn't sleep properly after that. I lay in the dark with the duvet pulled up higher than I'd ever admit, staring at the ceiling as if I could somehow see through it, waiting for the sound to come again. I kept telling myself it had to be pipes or something shifting under the floorboards, but the problem was, it hadn't sounded random. It had sounded spaced out, intentional, like someone knocking just hard enough to be heard, then waiting to see if I'd react. I must have drifted off eventually, because the next thing I remember was waking up to silence so complete it almost felt loud. That strange kind of quiet you only get in heavy snow, where the whole world seems muffled, like someone's wrapped it in thick wool. For a moment, I actually felt all right again. Morning light was leaking faintly through the edges of the curtains, dull and gray, but enough to remind me that I wasn't trapped in the dark anymore. I told myself straight away that everything would look different in daylight, less threatening, more explainable. That's how it always works, doesn't it? Night makes things worse than they are. I got up, pulled the curtain back just a little, and looked out over the yard. That's when my stomach dropped. The footprints were still there, not softened, not drifted over, still sharp, cutting across the snow exactly the same as the night before. But now I could see more clearly where they came from. They didn't start at the road. They didn't come down the lane or across the open field. They came from behind the byre, from the part of the property Gareth had told me not to go near. I stood there longer than I should have, just staring at them, trying to figure out how that made sense. The snow had fallen steadily all night. There should have been fresh cover over everything. Even my own prints from the day before were nearly gone near the front. But these looked like they'd been made after the snowfall had settled, which meant someone had been out there during the night, close enough to the house to reach the door, close enough that if I'd opened it when I first heard something, I might have been face to face with them. I stepped back from the window without thinking, letting the curtain fall back into place. My hands had gone cold again, even inside the house. All right, I muttered to myself, forcing a bit of logic into it. Someone's been up here, maybe a walker, maybe lost. But even as I said it, I knew it didn't sit right. No one just wanders behind someone else's house in weather like that. Not at night. Not without knocking properly, calling out, trying to get attention, and definitely not without leaving. I went downstairs slower than I had the night before, listening as I moved. The house felt different in the morning, not calmer, just aware somehow, like it was holding on to something I couldn't see yet. The kitchen looked exactly how I'd left it. Nothing moved, nothing out of place. I checked the back door again, pressing my hand against it like that would tell me something new. Still locked, still bolted, but the smears on the glass were clearer now. They weren't random marks, not wind, not branches. They curved slightly, like fingers dragging downward. And there were more of them than I'd noticed before, overlapping in places, as if someone had touched the same spot again and again. I swallowed, then reached out and wiped one with my sleeve. The condensation smeared under the fabric, but the shape of it stayed faintly visible. Whatever had made it hadn't been dirt. It had been moisture, skin. That was enough for me. I grabbed my phone and tried calling Gareth. No signal. I walked through the house, holding the phone up like that would help, checking near windows by the front door, even halfway up the stairs. Nothing. Not even a flicker of reception. Brilliant, I said under my breath. I thought about getting in the car and driving out right then, but when I checked through the front window, the lane had nearly disappeared under fresh snow. The wind had picked up again, pushing it across the ground in long, shifting sheets. If I left now and got stuck somewhere further out, I'd be worse off than I was here. So I did what people always do when they don't have a good option. I stayed. I made tea. Burnt the toast slightly because I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder. Tried to put the radio on for a bit of noise, but all it gave me was a low hiss and the occasional burst of static that made me flinch more than it helped. I turned it off after about 30 seconds. And then, because I couldn't ignore it anymore, I decided to look at the buyer. I told myself I wasn't going inside, just having a look, seeing where those tracks led properly in daylight. That was reasonable. That was controlled. I pulled my coat on, grabbed the torch from the counter, even though it was already light out, and stepped into my boots. Opening the back door this time felt different. I hesitated before I even touched the handle, listening for something I couldn't name. When nothing came, I unbolted it and eased it open. The cold hit harder than before, sharper, carrying that dry, biting edge that makes your lungs feel smaller. The yard was quiet, the snow squeaking faintly under my boots as I stepped out. The prints were exactly where I'd seen them from inside. Larger ones leading in, stopping at the door, and those smaller, partial marks beside them. I crouched down, studying them properly. The big ones were deep. Whoever made them had weight behind each step. But the smaller ones, they weren't consistent. One here, then nothing for a couple of feet. Then another faint impression, like the front half of a trainer. I straightened slowly, following them with my eyes. They led away from the door, back across the yard, towards the buyer. The closer I got, the more the wind seemed to die down, blocked by the thick stone walls. It was quieter there, too quiet. Even the distant sound of the wind over the fields seemed to fade. I stopped a few steps short of the buyer entrance. Up close, it looked worse than it had from the house. Older, neglected in a way the farmhouse wasn't. The wood across the doorway was rough, nailed in place from the inside like someone had sealed it deliberately. The edges were dark with damp, and one of the boards had a long crack running through it. That's where the tracks ended, right in front of it. I don't know what I expected. Standing there, movement, maybe, a sound, something that would confirm I wasn't imagining the situation I'd built up in my head. But there was nothing, just that thick, pressing silence. I took one step closer, leaning slightly to peer through the crack in the wood. At first, I couldn't see anything, just darkness, deeper than it should have been even for an unlit space. Then, as my eyes adjusted a bit, shapes started to form, the outline of the opposite wall, something low to the ground, old tools maybe, or broken furniture. And then, I pulled back sharply, heart slamming so hard it made me dizzy. For a split second, I thought I'd seen movement. Not clear, not definite. Just the faintest shift of something darker than the rest of the dark, low down, like it had drawn back when I looked in. I stood there frozen, trying to convince myself it had been nothing. A trick of the light. My eyes adjusting too quickly. That's all. But the longer I stood there, the more wrong it felt to just turn my back on it. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding smaller than I meant it to. No answer. I swallowed and tried again, louder this time. "If someone's in there, you need to come out. I'm calling the police." Still nothing. No sound, no movement. Just that same heavy silence pressing back at me from inside. I backed away slowly, every instinct in me telling me I shouldn't be standing there at all. The moment I turned and started walking back towards the house, I had this horrible feeling crawl up the back of my neck, like I'd just stepped away from something that had been waiting to see if I'd come closer. I didn't look back. I told myself not to. Told myself there was nothing there, that I was letting the quiet and the isolation get to me. But just as I reached the back door, hand on the handle, I heard it, a soft, deliberate tap from behind me, not on the wood, not on the ground, on the inside of the buyer door. I froze. It came again, one single knock, slow, measured, and this time there was no mistaking it. Something was inside, and it knew I was out there. I didn't open that door. I want to make that clear, because even now I still question it. Whether I should have, whether something might have been different if I had. But in that moment, Standing there with the cold biting through my coat and that sound still echoing in my head, every instinct I had told me the same thing. Get back inside. I didn't run. Not properly. It was more like I forced myself to move quickly without looking like I was panicking, if that even makes sense. I kept my back straight, walked the last few steps to the house, opened the door, stepped in, and shut it behind me harder than I meant to. Then I locked it. Bolt first, then the key. And I stood there, just inside the kitchen, listening. Nothing. No follow-up knock. No footsteps outside. No movement at all. Just the same quiet as before, thick and heavy, like the world had swallowed the sound before it could reach me. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and pressed my hands against the counter to steady myself. All right, I said under my breath, trying to sound like I believed it. Someone's messing about. That's all. But even as I said it, the thought didn't hold. Because if someone had been inside that buyer, why wouldn't they come out? Why not call for help? Why knock once, slowly, and then stop? And why did it feel like it hadn't been asking to be let out? I stayed in the kitchen for a long time after that, longer than I'd admit to anyone, long enough for the cold in my hands to fade and come back again. I kept expecting another sound, something louder this time, something that would force me to act, but nothing came. Eventually, I did what people do when they're scared and trying not to be. I distracted myself. I started tidying things that didn't need tidying, wiping down the same surface twice, rearranging things in the cupboards, anything to keep moving, to stop myself from thinking too hard about what I just heard. But it didn't last, because the longer I stayed in that house, the more it felt like I wasn't the only one in it. It's difficult to explain properly. It wasn't like I heard footsteps everywhere or saw shadows moving. It was subtler than that. A kind of pressure, like being watched without being able to prove it. Every time I turned my back on a doorway, I had this strange urge to turn back around again. Every time I passed a window, even with the curtains drawn, I felt like there was something just on the other side of the glass. Around midday, I tried calling Gareth again. Still nothing. I even tried ringing my dad, just to hear another voice, but the signal dropped before it could connect. That was when the isolation really started to sink in. It wasn't just that I was alone. It was that I couldn't easily stop being alone. I remember sitting at the kitchen table after that, staring at my phone like it might suddenly come back to life, when I heard it. A knock, not from behind me, from the front door. I froze instantly, every muscle going tight. It wasn't loud, not aggressive, just polite. 2 short knocks, spaced evenly apart. For a second, I actually felt relief. Someone normal. That was my first thought. Someone from the village, maybe. Or even just a passerby checking if everything was all right in the weather. I stood up slowly, listening. Nothing followed. No voice, no footsteps. Just silence again. I walked towards the front hall, my heartbeat picking up, but not in that sharp, panicked way from before. This felt different. Manageable. Explainable. Hello? I called out, stopping a few steps from the door. No response. I reached the door and hesitated, hand hovering near the latch. Then I remembered the chain and slid it into place before unlocking the door, just in case. When I opened it, I only pulled it a few inches at first, enough to see through the gap. At first, I thought there was no one there. The yard in front was covered in fresh snow again, the wind pushing it across the ground in thin streams. The lane beyond was barely visible through the haze. For a split second, I actually thought I'd imagined the knock. Then something moved slightly to the side of the doorframe. I opened the door a little wider, and that's when I saw him. A boy. Couldn't have been older than 10. He was standing just off to the right of the step, half turned towards the house, like he hadn't been sure whether to knock again or not. He wore a thin gray jumper, the kind you'd expect in a school uniform, and dark trousers that were damp all the way up to the knees. No coat, no hat, no gloves. His hair was wet, stuck flat against his forehead, and his face, that's the part I can't shake. He wasn't crying, wasn't shivering, wasn't even breathing heavily, as far as I could tell. He just stood there, completely still, looking at me with this blank, almost empty expression. Not scared, not relieved, just there. Are you all right? I asked, pushing the door open a bit more, the chain going tight. Where are your parents? He didn't answer straight away. He just kept looking at me, like he was trying to decide something. Then he said very quietly, "Can I come back in now?" The words hit me wrong. Not "can I come in?" Come back in. I felt a cold ripple run straight through me, sharper than anything I'd felt outside. "I think you've got the wrong house," I said, forcing a small, awkward smile that didn't feel real. "Do you live nearby? I can." "This is where I stay," he said, cutting me off. Same flat tone, no emotion, no hesitation. My grip on the door tightened slightly. "Who do you stay with?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, his eyes shifted, just slightly past me, into the house. I don't know why, but that was the moment everything in me went on edge. It wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't. The way he wasn't asking for help, wasn't explaining, wasn't reacting to the cold at all. Just standing there, as if the weather didn't matter, as if the situation didn't matter, as if he was waiting for something else entirely. "You shouldn't be out here like this," I said, my voice coming out tighter than I meant. "It's freezing." "Where did you come from?" He lifted his hand slightly and pointed. Not towards the road, not towards the fields. Behind the house, towards the buyer. My stomach dropped again, harder this time. "Is someone with you?" I asked quickly. He shook his head once. Then, after a pause, he said, "He doesn't like it when people ask questions." Something in the way he said that, so calm, so certain, made my skin crawl. "Who doesn't?" I asked, even though part of me didn't want to hear the answer. The boy didn't respond. He just kept looking at me, waiting. For a second, I genuinely didn't know what to do. Every normal instinct said, bring him inside, get him warm, call someone. But everything else, the footprints, the knock from the buyer, Garrett's warnings, was screaming at me not to. "I'm going to call someone to help you," I said finally, stepping back slightly. "Just stay there, all right?" For the first time, something changed in his expression. Not much, just a slight tightening around the eyes. "Don't," he said. It wasn't a plea. It sounded more like a warning. And before I could respond, before I could even process that properly, there was another knock. Behind me, inside the house, slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere below the floor again. I turned instinctively, heart slamming into my ribs, every bit of fear from earlier flooding back all at once. And in that split second, when my eyes left the doorway, something moved past me. Fast. Too fast. The chain rattled violently against the door as it was forced wider than it should have been able to go, the wood creaking under the pressure. I spun back around, and the boy was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just empty snow where he'd been standing, except for one thing, a set of small wet prints leading into the house. I slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. Chain, bolt, key, all of it. Hands shaking so badly I nearly missed the lock the first time. My chest felt tight, like I'd been running, but I hadn't moved more than a few steps. I just stood there afterwards, staring at the door as if it might open on its own. Then I looked down. The prints were there, clear as anything on the worn wooden floor just inside the threshold. Small, wet, perfectly shaped. They hadn't been there before. I would have seen them. And they didn't lead out. They led in. I remember actually whispering "no" under my breath, like saying it might undo it somehow, because there was no way I hadn't seen him walk past me. No way I wouldn't have heard something, anything, if he'd forced his way through the door. The chain had held. I knew it had. I'd heard it strain, but it hadn't snapped. The gap hadn't been wide enough for anyone to squeeze through. But the prints didn't care about that. They started at the door, and they went deeper into the house, one after the other, slow, measured, as if whoever made them wasn't in any hurry at all. I didn't follow them straight away. I couldn't. I just stood there, trying to get my breathing under control, staring at the trail like it might disappear if I looked at it long enough. But it didn't. The water from the snow was already soaking into the wood slightly, darkening it, fixing the shapes in place. Eventually, something in me pushed forward. Not bravery, not really. More like the need to understand, because standing there not knowing felt worse than whatever I might find. I moved slowly, keeping a few steps back from the prints at first, like I didn't want to disturb them. They crossed the front hall, turned slightly towards the kitchen, and then they stopped, just stopped. No turning point, no fading, no sign of where they went next. Just the last print, half-formed, as if the foot had barely touched down before it was lifted again and never put back. I stared at that final mark longer than anything else. That was the moment something shifted in my head. Up until then, I'd still been trying to force everything into something real, something explainable. Someone had been outside, someone had knocked, maybe a kid, maybe someone messing with me. There were ways to twist it into sense if I tried hard enough. But this, there was no way to explain footprints that just ended. Not in the middle of a room, not like that. I felt this slow, creeping dread settle in properly then. Not the sharp panic from before, but something heavier, more certain. I wasn't alone in that house, and whatever was there didn't move the way it should. I backed away from the prints, keeping my eyes on that last one until I couldn't anymore, then turned and walked straight into the kitchen. My hands were shaking again, worse this time, so I grabbed onto the edge of the counter just to steady myself. Think, I muttered. Just think. Police. That was the obvious next step. I reached for my phone again, already knowing what I'd find. No signal. I swore under my breath, louder than I meant to, the sound echoing strangely in the quiet house. For a moment I just stood there, phone in my hand, feeling completely useless. Then I remembered the landline. There had to be one. A place like this, miles out from anywhere, would have a backup. I started searching, moving faster now, opening drawers, checking shelves. It took longer than it should have, but eventually I found it mounted on the wall in a small alcove near the back. Old, beige plastic, the kind that looks like it shouldn't still work. I picked it up. Dead, no dial tone, no static, nothing, just silence. I stared at it for a few seconds, then slammed it back into place harder than I meant to. Of course, I said, the words coming out hollow. Everything that could cut me off had already done it. That was when I heard it again. Not a knock this time, a sound, faint, coming from somewhere upstairs. I froze instantly, every part of me going still. It wasn't loud, more like a soft dragging noise, the kind you'd barely notice if you weren't already on edge. Something shifting across the floor, slow, uneven. I felt my throat tighten. Hello? I called out, the word catching slightly. No response. The sound came again, just for a second, then stopped. I didn't want to go up there. That was the honest truth. Every instinct I had told me to stay where I was, keep the doors locked, wait it out until morning or until someone came. But there was another part of me, the same part that had made me step out to the buyer earlier, that wouldn't let it go. Because if something was up there, it was already inside, and pretending it wasn't going to help. I moved towards the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. The house seemed quieter the closer I got, like it was holding its breath. I placed my foot on the first step and paused, listening. Nothing. I started up. Each creak of the wood made me flinch slightly, even though I expected it. Halfway up, I stopped again, listening for that dragging sound. Still nothing. By the time I reached the top, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dim in the gray daylight filtering through the drawn curtains. All the doors were exactly as I'd left them, closed except one. The door to the spare room at the end of the hall. It was open, just a few inches. I knew I hadn't left it like that. I stood there for a second, staring at it, my mind trying to catch up with what I was seeing. Then, slowly, I walked towards it. Each step felt too loud, like I was announcing myself. I stopped just outside the doorway, hand hovering near the frame, and listened. Nothing. No movement, no breathing, no sound at all. I pushed the door open the rest of the way. The room was empty. Bed neatly made, curtains still drawn, nothing out of place. I let out a breath, the tension in my chest easing slightly. See? I muttered to myself. Nothing. Something moved behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance, heart jumping into my throat. The hallway was empty. Every door closed, except the bedroom I'd been using. Its door was now slightly open. I knew for a fact I'd shut it completely. I stared at it, the distance between us suddenly feeling much longer than it should have. And then, very slowly, it creaked open a little more, just enough to reveal the darkness inside. I didn't see anything move. I didn't hear footsteps. But I knew something was in there, waiting. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I realized something else that made everything worse. Whatever was in that house, it wasn't just following me, it was staying ahead of me. I didn't go into that room. I couldn't. I stood there in the hallway, completely frozen, staring at the gap in the door as if something might step out at any second. My body felt locked in place, like moving any closer would cross some line I wouldn't be able to come back from. The door didn't open any further. Nothing came out, but that almost made it worse. Because whatever had moved it, whatever had gone in there, was choosing not to show itself. And that meant it knew I was watching. I took a step back, then another, slow, careful, like I was trying not to make a sound even though the house already knew exactly where I was. "I'm leaving," I whispered, not even sure who I was saying it to. The words felt small, useless, but I meant them. I turned and went back down the stairs, faster this time, not running but not taking it slow either. The moment my foot hit the bottom step, something shifted behind me. A soft sound, like weight settling. Upstairs. I didn't look back. I went straight into the kitchen, grabbed my coat, my keys, my phone, anything I'd need, and headed for the front door. I didn't care about the snow anymore, or the lane, or getting stuck. Anything was better than staying in that house. I unlatched the chain, unlocked the door, and pulled it open. The cold hit me again, sharp and immediate. And for a second, I almost stepped out. But something stopped me. Not a sound, not movement, just a feeling. That same crawling sense I'd had before, standing near the buyer, like I was about to make the wrong move without understanding why. I hesitated on the threshold, eyes scanning the yard. That's when I saw them. More footprints, not the same as before. These were fresh, clear, and there were more of them. At least 3 different sets, maybe more, overlapping slightly in places where the snow had drifted. They came from the direction of the buyer again, crossed the yard, and spread out slightly near the front of the house. As if whoever made them hadn't just approached, they'd gathered. I felt my throat go dry. "All right," I whispered, barely able to get the word out. That was it. That was the moment something in me broke past fear and went straight into something else, something sharper, because it wasn't just one thing anymore. It wasn't just the boy. It wasn't just the noise in the house. There were others. Outside. Close. And I had no idea how long they'd been there. A gust of wind swept across the yard, lifting loose snow into the air, and for a split second it blurred everything. When it settled again, I thought I saw movement. Near the edge of the property, just beyond the stone wall, something low, then gone. I stepped back immediately and slammed the door shut again, locking it without thinking. My heart was racing now, faster than before, but it wasn't confusion anymore. It was certainty. I was surrounded. I backed away from the door slowly, my mind racing through options that didn't exist. No signal, no landline, roads barely passable, and something, multiple things outside, close enough to leave fresh tracks in the snow. And something inside, still upstairs, still waiting. I dragged a chair across the floor and jammed it under the front handle, then did the same with the back door, moving automatically, not even thinking about it properly. It didn't feel like it would stop anything, but doing nothing felt worse. Then I stopped, because the house had gone quiet again, not normal quiet, that same heavy silence from before, like everything had paused at once. And in that silence, I heard it, a voice, soft, close, not from upstairs this time, not from outside, from the hallway, just beyond the kitchen door. "Why did you lock it?" I froze. Every muscle in my body went tight, my breath catching halfway in. It was a child's voice, the same tone, flat, calm, too calm. I didn't move, didn't answer. The voice came again, slightly closer this time. "You weren't meant to lock it." My hands were shaking again, worse than before. I could feel it in my fingers, in my arms, even in my chest. "Who's there?" I managed to say, my voice barely steady, no response. Just a faint shift of weight, a soft step on the other side of the door. And then, another voice, different, lower, not a child. "You shouldn't have come here." The words were quiet, almost gentle, but there was something underneath them that made my stomach turn. Not anger, not warning, more like certainty. Like it didn't matter what I did next. I backed away slowly, every instinct telling me not to get closer to that door, not to open it, not to acknowledge whatever was standing there. Because deep down, I think I understood something in that moment. The rules Gareth had given me. The curtains, the doors, the buyer. They hadn't been about keeping something out. They'd been about keeping something in, and I'd already broken them. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Then another, slow, deliberate. Coming closer to the kitchen, I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy cast iron pan from the counter, holding it in both hands even though I knew it wouldn't make a difference. The handle of the kitchen door shifted slightly. Not turning, just testing, like something on the other side was checking if it was still there. Then a single knock from the other side of the door, slow, measured, exactly the same as before. And this time, I didn't feel like it was asking to be let in. It already was. I didn't open that door. I couldn't. The handle stopped moving after that single knock, and for a few seconds, maybe longer, I don't know, the whole house just held still. No footsteps, no voices, nothing pressing against the wood, just silence again, thick and suffocating. I stood there gripping the pan so tightly my hands started to ache. Think, I whispered to myself, barely breathing. Just think. Because whatever was in the hallway, it wasn't trying to force its way in. It didn't need to. That was the part that kept circling in my head, louder than anything else. It was already inside. And if it wasn't rushing me, if it wasn't breaking the door down or calling out again, then it was waiting for me to do something or go somewhere. My eyes drifted, almost without me realizing, towards the far corner of the kitchen, towards the scullery door, half hidden behind a shelf. The one Gareth had never mentioned, the one I hadn't opened yet. At the time, it hadn't seemed important. Just another storage space maybe, or a utility room. But now, standing there with the memory of the knocks beneath the floor, the voice saying down below, and the boy pointing towards the back, something clicked into place in a way that made my stomach turn. That wasn't just a room. It was something else. And whatever was happening in this house, it was connected to what was under it. Another soft creak came from the hallway. Closer now. Not moving quickly, just shifting, like something adjusting its weight. I didn't look at the door again. Instead, I backed slowly towards the scullery, keeping my movements quiet, controlled. The pan felt heavier in my hands now, useless, but I didn't let go of it. Having something, anything, felt better than standing there empty-handed. The scullery door opened with a soft, reluctant sound. Inside, it was colder. Not freezing, but noticeably colder than the rest of the house. The kind of cold that doesn't come from outside, but from somewhere enclosed. Damp, still. I stepped in and pulled the door almost closed behind me, leaving just a narrow gap. For a moment, I just stood there, letting my eyes adjust. It was smaller than I expected. Stone floor, low ceiling, a narrow counter along one side, cluttered with things that hadn't been touched in years. And at the far end, a second door, wooden, older than the rest of the house, set low into the wall, almost like it didn't belong there. I knew, without needing to check, that this was what I'd been hearing. This was what the knocks had come from. I took a step towards it, then stopped because behind me, in the kitchen, something moved. Not just a shift this time, a step, clear, deliberate. Crossing the floor, I held my breath, every part of me going rigid. Another step followed, slow, measured, heading towards the scullery. My grip tightened on the pan, but I didn't turn around, didn't make a sound. I just stood there, staring at the old door in front of me, knowing I didn't have time to hesitate anymore, because whatever was in the house was coming closer. The handle of the kitchen door moved, a soft click. The door opened just enough for a sliver of light to spill into the scullery, and in that thin gap, I saw something. Not clearly, not fully, just a shape, low, still, watching. I turned away instantly, my chest tightening so hard it felt like I couldn't breathe. "Don't look," I muttered under my breath, not even sure why. Then I grabbed the handle of the old door in front of me and pulled. It didn't open straight away. The wood stuck slightly, like it hadn't been moved in a long time. I pulled harder, and it gave with a dull, scraping sound that seemed far too loud in the confined space. Cold air rushed up from below, colder than anything else in the house, and darker. A narrow set of stone steps led down into it, disappearing into shadow. For a second, I hesitated. Every instinct I had screamed at me not to go down there. That whatever was happening above ground was bad enough, and going deeper into it was the worst decision I could make. But behind me, the kitchen door creaked open wider. Another step, closer, and then that voice again, the lower one, calm, almost patient. "You should have stayed where you were." That was enough. I stepped down. One step, then another. The cold wrapped around me immediately, thick and damp, clinging to my skin. The air smelled different down there, earthy, stale, with something faint underneath it that I couldn't place but didn't like. I kept moving, slowly, carefully. The light from above faded quickly, swallowed by the darkness as I descended. I reached for the wall with my free hand, steadying myself against the rough stone. After a few steps, the staircase opened out into a low chamber. I stopped at the bottom. For a moment, I couldn't see much of anything, just shapes, dark outlines against darker shadows. Then my eyes adjusted, and I realized I wasn't alone down there either. At first, I thought it was just the way things were arranged. Old furniture, maybe, boxes, piles of something stacked unevenly. But then, one of the shapes moved, slightly, just enough to break the illusion. I froze, my breath caught in my throat as I stared into the darkness. And slowly, very slowly, more shapes became clear. Not objects, not furniture, people, or something that looked like people, sitting, crouched, standing just out of reach of the faint light from the stairs. Too still, too quiet, watching. A soft sound came from somewhere deeper in the room. A child's voice, familiar. "You came down." My stomach dropped, because I knew that voice. It was the boy, the one from the door, the one who had never come in, but somehow was already here. I took a step back instinctive, then another. My foot hit the first stair, and behind me, from the darkness above, I heard it. A slow, deliberate step coming down after me. I didn't think. I moved. Straight back up the steps, two at a time, my hands scraping against the stone wall as I dragged myself upward. I didn't look behind me. I couldn't. Whatever was down there, those shapes, that voice, I knew if I turned around, I wouldn't make it back up. Another step sounded behind me, not rushed, not chasing, just following. That was worse. By the time I reached the top, my lungs were burning, my vision tightening at the edges. I grabbed the edge of the doorway and pulled myself up into the scullery, slamming the door behind me with everything I had. I shoved my weight against it, pressing hard, as if something might immediately throw itself at the other side. But it didn't. No impact, no hands, no sound, just silence again. I stood there, bent forward slightly, trying to catch my breath, my ears straining for anything at all. My arms were shaking so badly now I could barely keep them steady against the door. "All right," I whispered, though it didn't feel like anything was. Slowly I stepped away. Nothing pushed back. Nothing tried to follow. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. Because it meant something else. It meant whatever was down there didn't need to come up, or it already had. That thought hit me so suddenly I turned instinctively and froze. The scullery door, the one leading back into the kitchen. It was open, wider than before. I knew I hadn't left it like that. I knew I'd pulled it nearly shut. But now it stood half open, the dim light from the kitchen stretching into the room like a warning. For a second I couldn't move. My heart had slowed, but not in a good way. It felt heavy now, wrong, like it was dragging each beat out instead of pushing them forward. "Someone's in here," I said quietly, the words barely forming. Saying it made it real, but it didn't explain anything. Because I hadn't heard anyone come in, hadn't heard the front door, hadn't heard the back, and there was nowhere else they could have entered from. Unless, no. I didn't finish that thought. I stepped towards the kitchen slowly, forcing myself to move even though every part of me wanted to stay where I was, or go back down those stairs, or do anything except walk into whatever was waiting on the other side. I reached the doorway, paused, listened, nothing, no footsteps, no breathing, no voice, just that same heavy quiet pressing against everything. I pushed the door open the rest of the way. The kitchen was empty, exactly as I'd left it. Chair wedged under the front door handle, back door still blocked. Nothing moved, nothing disturbed. For a second, just a second, I almost laughed. A short, sharp breath that wasn't quite a laugh, but close enough, because it made no sense. None of it did. The voices, the shapes, the footsteps, the door opening on its own. It felt like I was losing track of what was real. And then I saw it, the pan, still sitting on the counter, exactly where I put it down. I hadn't realized I'd let go of it. I was sure I'd still been holding it when I went down the stairs. My chest tightened again. "Right," I muttered, louder this time. "Right, okay, I needed to leave." That was it. No more thinking. No more checking rooms. No more trying to understand something that clearly wasn't meant to be understood. I moved to the front door, hands steadier now, not because I was calm, but because something else had taken over. That part of you that kicks in when you know you're out of time. I pulled the chair away, ignoring the scrape of wood on tile, and reached for the lock, then stopped because something had changed. The light. It was darker outside now. That didn't make sense. It had only been a few minutes, 10 at most, since I'd come in from the yard. It shouldn't have gone from gray daylight to near dark that quickly. I leaned slightly towards the window beside the door, careful not to touch the curtain. For a moment I hesitated. Then I pulled it back just enough to see, and immediately wished I hadn't. There were people outside, not just footprints. People standing in the yard. 3 of them. No, 4. Maybe more further back, half hidden by the falling snow. They weren't moving, just standing there, spaced out unevenly across the white ground facing the house. I couldn't see their faces properly. The light was too low, the snow too thick, but I could make out their shapes, the way they stood, too still, too straight, like they'd been placed there, watching, waiting. My hand slipped slightly on the curtain. One of them moved, not a full step, just a slight shift, but it was enough, because it meant they weren't frozen, they weren't statues, they were aware of me. I let the curtain fall back into place immediately, my breath catching hard in my throat. "No," I whispered. "No, no." A sound cut me off behind me, soft, close. I turned slowly. The kitchen door, the one leading back to the hallway, it was closed now. I knew it had been open. I'd walked through it. But now, it was shut, and from the other side came a knock, slow, measured, exactly the same as before. Once, then again, and then a voice. Right on the other side of the door, the boy's voice, soft, almost gentle. "You shouldn't have gone down there." I couldn't answer. I couldn't even move. I just stood there, caught between the door behind me and the shapes outside, my mind racing through the same question over and over again. Which one was worse? And then the voice came again, closer this time, as if his face was right up against the wood. "They know you've seen them now." A pause. "Then, now they won't let you leave." I don't remember deciding to move. 1 second I was standing there, stuck between the door and the window, and the next I was backing away, step by step, like my body had taken over without asking me. "They won't let you leave." That line didn't echo. It settled. It stayed there, heavy and certain, like something that had already happened rather than something that might. I shook my head slightly, more to break the feeling than anything else. "That's not," I started, but the words didn't finish, because I didn't believe them. I didn't believe anything anymore. Another knock came from the kitchen door, not louder, not more urgent, just patient. That was the worst part of it. Nothing here was rushing me, nothing was panicking. Whatever this was, it already knew how it would end. I turned away from the door and forced myself to think, properly think, not react. Front door, blocked by whatever was outside. Back door, same problem, maybe worse. Windows too small, and even if I smashed one, I'd be stepping straight into them. Them. I swallowed hard and pressed my hand against my face, trying to steady myself. "There's got to be something," I muttered. "Somewhere to hide, somewhere to lock myself in, somewhere to wait this out until morning, if morning even meant anything here anymore." Because that was the other thing that didn't sit right. The light outside. It had dropped too quickly, far too quickly. I moved back towards the window again, slower this time, careful not to make any sudden movement. I didn't pull the curtain all the way, just enough to look through the smallest gap. They were still there. Closer now. I hadn't seen them move, but they were closer. The one nearest the house stood just a few feet from the door now, its outline clearer against the snow. Tall, thin, shoulders slightly hunched, like the weight of its own body didn't sit right. Its head tilted slightly. Not much, just enough to make it look like it was listening. To me, my breath caught. I let the curtain fall again, stepping back quickly, my chest tightening as that crawling feeling spread through me again. "They're not real," I whispered, even though I didn't believe that either. Behind me, the knock came again, closer this time. Not louder, just closer, like the distance between us had shortened somehow, even though the door hadn't moved. "You shouldn't ignore them," the boy's voice said softly. "That makes it worse." My hands curled into fists. "What do you want?" I snapped, louder than I meant to. The sound of my own voice in that house felt wrong, like it didn't belong there. Silence. Then, "I don't want anything," he said. A pause. "They do." The words landed like a weight in my chest. I backed away again, shaking my head. No, that's..." A sudden, sharp sound cut me off. from the front door, a scrape, like something dragging slowly across the wood from the outside. I turned instinctively, heart slamming. Another scrape followed, longer this time, lower, as if something was testing the surface, tracing it. I moved closer without thinking, just enough to see the bottom edge of the door. For a second, there was nothing. Then something slid into view, thin, pale, not quite the right shape. A hand, or something close enough to one. The fingers were too long, slightly bent at odd angles, like they didn't quite understand how they were meant to move. The skin, if it was skin, looked wrong too. Too smooth in some places, too dark in others, like it had been pressed together from different pieces. It pressed flat against the gap at the bottom of the door. Then slowly, very slowly, it dragged across it, feeling, searching. I stumbled back, a sound catching in my throat before I could stop it. The hand stopped instantly, went still, and for a moment, everything did. No wind, no movement, no sound at all. Then, a soft laugh, not loud, not sharp, just there, from outside, more than one voice. I backed further into the kitchen, my legs shaking now, my breathing uneven. "They're learning you," the boy's voice said quietly behind the door. "That's how it works." I turned towards it again, anger cutting through the fear for just a second. "What does that even mean?" I demanded. No answer, just that same silence. And then, a new sound, from somewhere deeper in the house. Not the hallway, not upstairs, below. A dull, heavy thud, followed by another and another, like something striking against wood or stone. I felt my stomach drop, because I knew exactly where it was coming from. The cellar. Something down there was moving now. Not shifting, not whispering, moving. And it sounded bigger than anything I'd seen. I took a step back, my mind racing. "No," I said under my breath. "No, that's not." The boy's voice interrupted, softer now. "You woke them up." My head snapped towards the door. "What? You weren't meant to go down there," he continued almost gently. "They stay quiet if you leave them alone." Another thud echoed through the floor, stronger this time, closer. I felt it through my feet. "They don't like it when people see them," he added. My chest tightened. "How many are there?" I asked before I could stop myself. There was a long pause, too long. And then, enough. The word barely left his mouth before something slammed into the underside of the floor, hard enough to make the plates in the cupboard rattle. I flinched violently, stumbling back until I hit the counter behind me. Another impact followed, and another, each one heavier, closer, like whatever was down there was trying to get out. And then, everything stopped, just like that. Silence, complete. I stood there, barely breathing, waiting for the next one. But it didn't come. Instead, from the other side of the kitchen door, the handle moved, slowly, deliberately. This time it started to turn. I stared at the handle as it turned, slowly, deliberately. There was no rush to it, no force, just a steady, controlled movement like whoever or whatever was on the other side already knew the door would open. I hadn't locked it. I realized that too late. The handle reached the end of its turn. The latch clicked, and then the door opened. Not wide, just enough, a narrow gap, darkness beyond it. For a second, nothing moved. I didn't either. I just stood there, every muscle locked, my eyes fixed on that thin slice of space where the hallway should have been. But it didn't look like the hallway. Not properly. The light didn't reach into it the way it should have. The edges seemed wrong, too deep, too dark, like the space on the other side had stretched somehow, pulling away from the door instead of meeting it. Then something shifted in that darkness, low, close to the floor. My breath caught in my throat. I took a step back without thinking, my heel catching slightly against the tile behind me. "Don't," the boy's voice whispered suddenly, not from the door, from somewhere inside the kitchen. My head snapped to the side. Nothing there, but I could feel it now, closer than before, not behind the wall anymore, not separated, inside. With them, the voice continued softly, almost urgently now. "Don't let them see you move." I froze again. My eyes darted back to the door. The gap hadn't changed, but the darkness inside it had. It felt thicker, like it was pushing forward slightly, pressing against the frame. And then a hand appeared, not reaching out, not grabbing, just resting against the edge of the door. The same wrong shape as before, too long, too thin. The fingers bent at strange angles like they'd been taught how to move by watching someone else do it, but never quite got it right. It stayed there, still, waiting. I didn't move, didn't breathe properly. The voice in the room, wherever it was, fell silent again. Seconds passed, or maybe longer. I don't know. Time didn't feel right anymore. Then, the hand shifted, not towards me, along the edge of the door, tracing it, slow, careful, as if it was feeling the boundary between where it was and where I was. And then, it stopped. The fingers curled slightly, and the door opened a fraction wider. That was enough. Something else moved behind it, taller, the shape rising slowly into view. I couldn't see a face. Not clearly, just the suggestion of one. A darker shape where it should have been, but no detail, no features. Like it wasn't fully there yet, or like it didn't need to be. My chest tightened painfully as I forced myself to stay still. Don't move. That's what the voice had said. Don't let them see you move. I didn't understand how that worked, but I understood one thing. Whatever this was, it hadn't noticed me yet. Not properly. The shape leaned slightly forward. The hand dropped from the doorframe, and then it took a step into the room. No sound, not even the creak of the floor. But I saw the movement, felt it, like the air shifted around it. My grip tightened on the edge of the counter behind me, my fingers digging into the wood to stop them from shaking. It stood there, just inside the kitchen now. Too tall, too thin. The way it held itself was wrong. Like it didn't quite understand how to stand naturally. Its head tilted slightly, the same way the figure outside had. Listening, searching. For a second, I thought it was going to turn towards me. I could feel it. That moment right before something notices you. But it didn't. Instead, it turned its head slightly towards the front door, towards the things outside. And then, it moved again, crossing the room slowly, deliberately, heading away from me. My breath came back in a sharp, shaky inhale I couldn't stop. It hadn't seen me, or it had chosen not to. I didn't know which was worse. The thing reached the front door and stopped. Its head tilted again, and then, very slowly, it bent down, lower, lower, until it was almost level with the gap beneath the door. And for a moment, everything went still again. Then, something pushed back from the other side. That same pale, wrong hand, sliding under the door. The two shapes met, not touching, just close, like they were recognizing each other, communicating, without sound. My stomach twisted. They're all connected, the boy's voice whispered again, right beside me now, so close I could almost feel breath that wasn't there. They don't come alone. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What are they? I whispered back before I could stop myself. There was a pause, a long one, and then, "They're what's left," he said quietly. A sudden crack split the silence. The front door jerked violently. The chair wedged beneath the handle, scraped across the floor an inch. The thing at the door straightened slowly, its head turning, not towards the door anymore, towards me. I felt it before I saw it. That shift, that awareness. My chest locked, my body went cold. Because this time it knew exactly where I was, and it had decided to look. The moment it turned its head, I knew. That was the exact moment everything changed. Before that, there had still been this thin, fragile line between me and it. Like I was hidden somehow. Like I was outside whatever rules it followed. That line was gone. It didn't move quickly. That's what made it worse. It just stood there, slowly straightening up from the door, its head tilting in that same unnatural way. But now it was facing me. Properly. I couldn't see its face. Not clearly. But I could feel where it was looking. Right at me. My body wouldn't respond. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to grab something, to do anything. But I couldn't move. It was like something had locked me in place the second it noticed me. The air felt heavier, thicker, harder to breathe. And then it took a step. Toward me. No sound, no weight, just movement. Slow, deliberate. I felt my chest tighten painfully as my breath came in short, shallow bursts. "Don't," the boy's voice whispered urgently, right beside my ear now. "Don't run." That snapped something loose. Not enough to move properly, but enough to think. "If I don't run, what do I do?" I whispered, barely able to get the words out. There was a pause. Too long. Then, "It depends if it remembers you." The thing took another step. Closer now. Too close. I could see more of it. Not details, not features, but the outline. The way its arms hung slightly too long at its sides. The way its shoulders didn't sit right. The way its head leaned just a bit too far, like it was trying to align itself with me. Remember me? That didn't make sense. "I've never," I started, my voice shaking. But then, something flickered. Not in the room, in my head. A memory, or something like one. The farmhouse. Not as it looked now, older, darker, colder, and someone standing in the doorway, watching. The image vanished as quickly as it came, leaving a dull pressure behind my eyes. My stomach twisted. "No," I whispered, shaking my head slightly. The thing stopped moving, its head tilted further, like it had heard that, like it understood. "They don't forget," the boy said softly. My throat went dry. "What are you talking about?" No answer. The thing took another step. Now it was only a few feet away, close enough that I could feel something coming off it. Not heat, not cold. Something else. Something that made my skin crawl, like standing too close to a live wire without touching it. I forced my hand to move, just slightly, reaching behind me, the counter, the pan, anything. But the second my fingers twitched, the thing reacted. Its head snapped slightly, not fast, but immediate, focused, and I froze again. "They see movement," the boy whispered. "That's how they find you." My hand stopped midair, my breath caught. The thing leaned forward slightly, closer, close. I could feel it now. Not physically, but there. Like the space between us had filled with something heavy, something watching me back. Then, from outside, a loud thud hit the front door. The chair scraped violently across the floor. Another impact followed. Harder. The thing's head turned sharply back towards the door. The pressure lifted slightly. I sucked in a breath, my chest burning. "They're coming in," the boy said quietly. The front door shuddered again under another blow. Wood creaked. The handle rattled violently. The thing in front of me straightened. And then slowly, it turned away from me. Again, like I wasn't the priority anymore. Like something else mattered more. It began moving back towards the door. Each step silent, measured, purposeful. My body unlocked just enough for me to shift. My legs trembling as I took a step sideways, keeping my eyes on it. I didn't understand why it had left me alone again. Didn't understand why it hadn't come closer. But I wasn't going to question it. Not yet. The front door cracked. A thin line split along the frame. Cold air forced its way through, and something else, a sound, not a voice, not quite, more like breathing. Multiple, slow, uneven, waiting. The thing reached the door, stopped, its head tilting again as it listened to whatever was outside. Then, it bent down, the same way as before, lowering itself towards the gap, and this time the hand that came through from the other side didn't stop. It pushed further in, forcing space, stretching the gap wider than it should have been able to. The wood creaked, split slightly. The chair shifted another inch. "They're stronger together," the boy whispered. My heart was racing again, faster than before. "Then how do I stop them?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. Another pause, long, too long, and then, "You don't." The answer hit harder than anything else. The door gave way with a sharp crack. The gap widened. More hands appeared, more shapes pressing forward. The thing inside stepped back slightly, making room, letting them in. And for the first time since all of this started, I realized something worse than being trapped. I wasn't the only one they were after. I was just the next one. And whatever had been here before me had never left. I didn't stay in the kitchen. The moment the door began to give way, something instinctive took over again. Not panic this time, something colder, more focused, survival. I moved, quietly, sideways at first, then back towards the scullery, keeping low, keeping my eyes on the thing by the door. It didn't look at me. Not anymore. It was completely focused on what was outside, on the hands forcing their way through, on the shapes gathering beyond the broken frame. It was helping them. That was the part I couldn't ignore. It wasn't trapped. It wasn't afraid. It was letting them in. I slipped into the scullery and pulled the door almost closed behind me again, leaving just enough of a gap to see through. The kitchen was changing. That's the only way I can describe it. Not physically, not like the walls were shifting or the floor was moving, but the space felt wrong. Like it was being stretched thin, pulled between whatever was inside and whatever was outside. The front door cracked further, wood splintered. One of the hands forced its way through up to the wrist now, dragging itself along the edge of the frame, fingers clawing for something to grip. Then another, and another. Too many, too fast. The thing that had come from the hallway stepped aside fully, its body folding slightly in a way that didn't make sense, making space like it had done this before, like this was routine. "They don't break in," the boy's voice said behind me. I flinched. He was closer now, right behind me. I could feel it. Not warmth, not breath, just presence. They're invited. I turned slightly, my heart hammering again. I didn't invite anything, I whispered sharply. You opened the door, he said. The words hit harder than they should have. Because I had. Not just once. The front door, the buyer, the seller. Each time I'd crossed something without understanding what it meant, I swallowed hard. Then why are you here? There was a pause. And for the first time, the boy hesitated. I didn't leave in time. Something inside me dropped. What does that mean? But he didn't answer. Instead, another sound came from the kitchen. Not from the door this time, from the floor, a dull crack. Then another. I turned back towards the gap in the scullery door. The thing by the front entrance had stopped moving, its head tilted sharply downward. Listening, another crack split through the room, louder this time. The floorboards near the center of the kitchen shifted slightly, just enough to notice. My chest tightened. No, I whispered. Another impact came from below, heavy, violent. The wood buckled slightly. They're coming up, the boy said quietly. My heart slammed into my ribs. Who is? He didn't answer straight away, and I already knew why. Because I'd seen them, down there, in the dark, waiting. The ones below, the ones I'd woken up. They stay underneath, he said finally, until something calls them. Another crack tore through the floor. A splinter shot up from between the boards. The shapes at the door didn't move, didn't react. It was like they were waiting too, for something else to happen first. My head spun. They're not the same? I asked, my voice shaking. The boy was quiet for a moment. Then, no, that was worse, much worse. Because it meant there wasn't just one thing in this house. There were layers, different kinds, different rules. Another blow from below made the entire floor shudder. The boards split wider this time, a dark gap forming between them. Something moved beneath it, fast, gone before I could properly see it. I stumbled back a step, my shoulder hitting the wall behind me. What do they want? I asked, my voice cracking now. The boy's answer came softer than before. Space. The word didn't make sense. Space for what? No answer. The next impact was violent. The floor gave slightly. The gap widened, and something pushed up through it. A hand. Not like the ones at the door. This one was worse. Thicker, stronger. The fingers shorter but broader, the joints bending in ways they shouldn't. The skin, if it was skin, looked stretched tight, like it didn't quite fit what was underneath. It slammed against the broken boards once, twice, then gripped the edges, pulling. The wood splintered further. The thing at the front door turned its head slightly, watching, waiting, like it knew what was about to happen. They don't like sharing, the boy whispered. My chest tightened painfully. What does that mean? Another pull. The gap in the floor widened enough to reveal more, a shape beneath, larger than the others, pressed up against the underside of the house, trying to force its way through. They take turns, he said. The words sent a cold shock through me. Take turns doing what? There was a pause, and then keeping it full. The floor broke. Not completely, but enough. A section of wood split open under the pressure, creating a jagged hole in the middle of the kitchen. The hand forced through, then part of an arm. Thick, wrong. The thing at the door stepped back further now, giving space, letting it happen. And in that moment, everything clicked into place. The house, the rules, the warnings, the reason Gareth didn't want anyone here. This wasn't just a place, it was a boundary. Something built to contain whatever was underneath, and whatever came looking for it. And I had broken it open from both sides. They'll decide now, the boy said quietly. My breath caught. Decide what? He didn't answer, but I didn't need him to. Because both sides, the ones outside and the one coming up from below, were moving at the same time, towards the same place, and I was standing right in the middle of it. I didn't move. I couldn't. Both sides were coming in now, slowly but without hesitation, like they'd already agreed on something I wasn't part of. The thing forcing its way up from the floor dragged itself higher, splintering more wood as it came. The shape of it was clearer now, broad shoulders forcing through a space too small, bones or something like them pressing against the edges as it pushed. It didn't make a sound. Not a growl, not a breath, just movement, relentless. At the same time, the front door finally gave way. The chair snapped sideways with a sharp crack, skidding across the tiles as the wood split open enough for the first of the shapes outside to slip through. Not fully, not like a person stepping in. More like it folded itself through the gap, compressing, narrowing, forcing its way inside, in a way that didn't follow any logic my brain could hold on to. Another followed, and another, the kitchen filled with them. Not crowded. No, that wasn't right. They spaced themselves out, deliberately, like they were forming something, a circle, around the broken floor, around the thing climbing up, around me. I felt it then, properly. That certainty again. This wasn't random. This wasn't chaos. This was a process. "They're not here for you," the boy said quietly. He was right beside me now. I didn't look at him. I didn't want to. "Then what is this?" I whispered. A pause. "They're here because of you." That made less sense somehow. Before I could ask anything else, the thing from below forced itself fully through the floor. The wood split apart beneath it, collapsing inward as it dragged its body up into the room. It was bigger than I thought. Not just taller, wider, heavier. Built wrong, like too much had been forced into one shape. It didn't stand straight away. It crouched there, low to the ground. Its limbs splayed slightly as if it needed time to adjust to the space above. The others didn't move. They didn't react. They just watched. Every single one of them, waiting. The thing from below lifted its head slowly, and for the first time, I saw something like a face. Not clearly, not fully, but enough, and something about it. Something deep in my chest. Recognized it. I staggered back a step, my head spinning. "No," I whispered. That memory hit again. Stronger this time. The farmhouse, not now, before. Colder, darker, and someone standing in the doorway, watching. The same shape, the same presence, waiting. "You've been here before," the boy said softly. I shook my head immediately. "No, I haven't. I've never. You just don't remember properly." My chest tightened. That pressure behind my eyes returned, sharper now, like something trying to force its way through. "I don't," I started, but the words broke apart. Because something was wrong. Not just here. In me. Something that didn't fit. The thing from below stood up fully. The room seemed smaller with it there. The others shifted slightly, not away, but making space. Giving it room, giving it priority. "They're not choosing you," the boy continued. My throat went dry. "Then what are they doing?" A long pause. "Then they're deciding if you still belong to them." The words hit like a shock. "What does that even mean?" I said, louder now, panic breaking through again. No answer. The thing took a step towards me, heavy, not silent like the others. The floor creaked under its weight. Another step. Closer. The others didn't move, didn't interfere. They just watched. My back hit the wall behind me, nowhere left to go. "No," I said, shaking my head, my voice breaking. "No, I don't belong to anything. I don't even know what this is." The thing stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel it. That same pressure, that same wrongness, but stronger. Its head tilted slightly, studying me, like it was trying to place something, remember something, and then, very slowly, it reached out. Not fast, not aggressive, just deliberate. Its hand, thick, heavy, wrong, hovered in front of my chest. Waiting, I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, and in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't an attack, this wasn't about being hunted, this was about being recognized, claimed, or rejected. "They're checking," the boy whispered. My chest burned as I forced the words out. "Checking what?" A long silence followed. Then, "If you're one of them." The hand moved, closer, closer, and then it touched me. Everything stopped, no sound, no movement, no breath, just contact. And then everything came rushing back at once, not memories, not properly, fragments, images, sounds. That same house, but not empty, voices, crying, something beneath the floor, watching, waiting, and me, standing at the edge of it, not as I was now, smaller, younger, looking down into the dark, and something looking back up at me. My vision snapped back. I gasped, stumbling forward slightly as the thing pulled its hand away. The room shifted again. The others moved, not closer, not further, just adjusting, reacting. The thing in front of me tilted its head again, then stepped back. The space around me opened slightly, not fully, but enough. "They know now," the boy said quietly. My chest heaved as I tried to breathe properly again. "Know what?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. Another pause. And then, "You weren't supposed to come back." I couldn't speak for a second. The words just sat there, heavy, pressing into everything else that was already breaking apart in my head. "You weren't supposed to come back." "I didn't," I said finally, shaking my head, my voice unsteady. "I didn't come back. I've never been here before." But even as I said it, it didn't sound right, didn't feel right. The thing in front of me didn't react to the words. It didn't care about what I said. It had already made its decision about something else. Behind it, the others shifted slightly. Not towards me, not away, just settling, like something had been resolved. The pressure in the room changed again, subtle, but enough. The urgency was gone. That suffocating tension that had been building since I first heard the knock eased, just a fraction. And somehow, that made it worse, because it meant this wasn't the dangerous part anymore. This was what came after. They don't need to decide anymore, the boy said quietly. I forced myself to look at him properly for the first time. He was standing just a few feet away now. Still the same. Still wrong. His clothes were damp, clinging slightly to him, but he didn't shiver. Didn't blink much either. His eyes stayed fixed on me in a way that felt too steady, too aware. What did they decide? I asked. He didn't answer straight away. Instead, he glanced past me, towards the thing that had touched me, then back again. They remembered you, he said. My stomach twisted. That doesn't mean anything, I snapped, more sharply than I meant to. People remember things. That doesn't mean I belong to this. You left, he interrupted. The words cut through everything else. I stopped. What? You were here, he continued, his voice still calm, still flat, but something underneath it had changed. Not like this before. My chest tightened again. That's not possible. But the images, those flashes, they were still there. Faint, fragmented, but real enough that I couldn't ignore them anymore. The house, not empty, not quiet. Voices, other people, children, something under the floor. And me, not as I am now. Watching, listening. No, I said again, quieter this time. That's not. You were taken, he said. That stopped everything. The room, the movement, my thoughts, all of it. What? I whispered. His eyes didn't leave mine. Not by them, he said, nodding slightly towards the things in the room. By someone else. Gareth. The name hit me instantly. Not as a clear memory, but as a feeling, recognition, that same cold certainty I'd felt since the beginning. He didn't tell you, the boy added. Of course he didn't. That explained everything. The rules, the warnings, the way he spoke. Like he wasn't trying to protect the house. Like he was trying to manage it, contain it, and me. My chest tightened painfully as I tried to piece it together. You're saying? I struggled to get the words out. He brought me here before? The boy didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The silence said enough. A sound came from the kitchen floor. I turned instinctively. The thing from below had moved, not towards me, away, slowly stepping back towards the broken opening in the floor. The others followed suit, not rushing, not retreating in fear, just withdrawing, like they were done, like whatever they'd come for had already happened. My breathing quickened again. Where are they going? I asked. They don't stay when it's settled, the boy said. Settled? I repeated. He nodded slightly. They know what you are now. That didn't help. That made it worse. What am I demanded. Another pause, longer this time. And when he finally spoke, his voice was softer. You're not like them, he said. Relief hit me instantly, then vanished just as quickly. Not anymore. The words landed like a weight in my chest. What does that mean? I asked, my voice barely holding together. He stepped back slightly. For the first time since I'd seen him, he looked uncertain. They let you go once, he said. That doesn't happen. My throat went dry. Why? I don't know, he said. And that was the first honest thing he'd said. They don't forget, he added, and they don't give things back. The room was emptying now. Bleshgor. The shapes at the door slipping back out into the snow. The thing from below lowering itself into the broken floor again, disappearing piece by piece into the darkness beneath. Within seconds, they were gone, just like that. No sound, no trace, just the wreckage they'd left behind. The broken door, the shattered floor, and the silence. I stood there, barely able to process it. They're gone? I asked, not sure if I believed it. The boy didn't answer straight away. He was looking towards the doorway now, towards the outside. They're never gone, he said quietly. They just wait. A cold shiver ran through me. For what? He looked back at me. For you to leave again. The words didn't make sense at first. Why would I? And then it hit me. If I left, if I walked out of that house, if I went back to normal life, to normal places, I wouldn't be alone anymore. They followed you once, he said softly. They'll do it again. My chest tightened painfully. No, I whispered, but I could already feel it. That same wrongness, not just in the house anymore, in me. Something that hadn't been there before. Or maybe Something that had always been there, just waiting. What happens if I don't leave? I asked. The boy hesitated again. Then, you stay, he said. I swallowed hard. And you? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back, towards the hallway, towards the dark, and for the first time, there was something in his expression. Not fear, not relief, something else, something quieter. You should have stayed away, he said. And then he was gone, just like the others, leaving me alone, in a house that no longer felt empty. Because now, I understood something I hadn't before. It wasn't the house that was holding them. It never had been. It was me. I don't know how long I stood there after he disappeared. Minutes. Maybe longer. The house was quiet again, properly quiet this time, but it didn't feel like safety. It felt like the kind of silence that comes after something has already happened, like everything had settled into place, and I was the only one still trying to catch up. The kitchen looked wrong, not because it had changed, but because I had. The broken floor, the splintered boards, the cracked door hanging unevenly on its hinges, it all felt distant somehow, like I was looking at it through something else, something thicker than air. I forced myself to move, slow at first, then quicker, because standing still didn't feel like an option anymore. I went to the front door and pushed it open the rest of the way. The cold hit me again, sharper now, cutting straight through everything else. The yard stretched out in front of me, pale and empty under the fading light. No figures, no movement, no footprints except the ones I already knew were there. For a second, it looked normal, almost peaceful. That made it worse. I stepped outside. The snow crunched under my boots, the sound too loud in the stillness. I kept expecting something to move, something to shift at the edge of the fields or behind the wall. Nothing did. The air felt clearer out here, cleaner, but it didn't feel safe, because the boy's words hadn't left me. They followed you once, they'll do it again. I turned slowly, looking back at the house. It didn't look like anything had happened. Not from here. Just an old farmhouse, quiet and still in the middle of nowhere. But I knew what was inside, and I knew what had been. My chest tightened again. I could leave. That thought came suddenly, sharp, immediate. The car was still there. The lane might be bad, but it wasn't impossible. If I left now, I could get back to town, back to people, back to something normal. I took a step towards the yard, then stopped because something didn't feel right. Not outside, inside. I looked down at my hands. They were still shaking slightly, but that wasn't it. There was something else, a faint pressure, like the same weight I'd felt in the room before. But now, it wasn't around me. It was in me. I clenched my fist. The feeling didn't go away. It stayed, steady, present. And then, very faintly, I heard it. A knock. Not from the house, not from the door, from somewhere further out. I looked up sharply. The sound came again, soft, distant, from beyond the stone wall. One knock, then another. My chest tightened. No, I whispered, because I understood now that sound, it wasn't something coming towards me. It was something waiting for me. The same way they had before. The same pattern, the same invitation. I took a step back, then another. My breathing quickened again, but it wasn't panic. It was realization. If I walked away from that house, if I crossed that yard, if I followed the lane, I wouldn't be escaping anything. I'd be bringing it with me. The thought settled deep, heavier than anything else. I turned slowly back towards the farmhouse, the broken door, the dark inside, that place where everything had already happened, that place that knew me, that place that had let me go once. My stomach twisted. Why? I muttered under my breath. Why me? No answer, just the wind, faint now, moving across the fields. But then something shifted behind me. Close, too close, I turned instinctively. Nothing there, but the feeling remained, that same presence, that same awareness. Not outside anymore, not watching from a distance, with me. A faint reflection caught my eye in the window beside the door. I looked at it, and for a second, I didn't recognize what I saw. It wasn't clear, not fully, just a distortion. A shape slightly out of place, like something was standing just behind me, perfectly aligned, close enough to overlap. My breath caught. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to, because I already knew. They hadn't followed me out. They hadn't needed to. They were already here. I stepped back into the house slowly, my eyes still fixed on the reflection until the angle shifted and it disappeared. The door creaked as I pulled it closed behind me. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full, not with movement, Not with sound, but with something else, something waiting, something patient, something that didn't need to hide anymore. I stood there in the dim light, the cold creeping in through the broken wood, and realized something that made everything else feel small. This wasn't about escaping. It never had been. It was about containment. And the moment I stepped outside, that containment broke. My chest tightened again, because now there was only one question left. Not how to leave, not how to survive, but how long before it started again? Somewhere else, with someone else, because the knock hadn't stopped, it had just moved, and now it sounded like it was coming from inside my own head. I didn't leave that night. I stayed, not because I wanted to, but because I understood something I couldn't ignore anymore. Whatever that house was, whatever it had been built for, it wasn't just holding something in, it was holding something back from everywhere else. I pushed furnished furniture against the doors again, even though I knew it didn't matter now. The front door barely held together as it was, and the floor in the kitchen had split enough to expose the dark below like an open wound that would never close properly again. Still, I did it, because doing nothing felt worse. I didn't go upstairs, didn't go near the scullery. I stayed in the kitchen, sitting against the wall opposite the broken floor, watching it like it might move again at any second. It didn't, not that night, but the silence never felt safe again. Because now I knew what silence meant. It meant waiting. At some point, I don't know when, I must have drifted. Not properly asleep, just that heavy, exhausted state where your body gives in before your mind does. And that's when it started again. The knocking, soft, distant, not from the house, from somewhere else. I opened my eyes slowly. The kitchen was the same, broken, still, but the sound was clearer now, closer, not outside, not below, inside my head. One knock, then another, spaced out, measured, the exact same rhythm. I pressed my hands against my ears instinctively, but it didn't help. It wasn't coming from the air. It was already in me. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, that's not real. But it was, because with each knock, something shifted. Not around me, inside me. That same pressure again, that same presence. Growing, learning. I stumbled to my feet, breathing hard, pacing the length of the kitchen like movement might shake it loose. It's over, I muttered. It's done. They left. Another knock. Closer, heavier, and then a voice, faint, barely there. Let me in, I froze. My chest tightened painfully. No, I said immediately, but my voice sounded weaker than it should have, distant, like it didn't belong to me. It's cold out here. The words weren't spoken out loud. They formed, inside my head, calm, patient, familiar. I shook my head again, harder this time. No, you're not. You opened it before. That stopped me, because it was true. Every time. The door, the buyer, the seller. Every step I'd taken had been the same mistake repeated in a different way. The knocking came again. Slower now. Closer. Just once more. I staggered back, my hand pressing against my chest as if I could physically push the feeling out. I'm not opening anything, I said, louder now, forcing the words out. Silence followed. Long, heavy, and for a second I thought it had stopped. Then, a different voice, lower. The same one from before. You already did. My breath caught, and suddenly, the memory snapped into place. Not fragments, not flashes, clear, sharp. The house, years ago. Not abandoned, not empty. And me, standing in the same kitchen, smaller, younger, watching someone open the door, watching something come inside and not stopping it, not understanding what it meant. The memory twisted in my chest because I knew what came next. I didn't leave. Not properly. Not back then. Something had stayed, something small, something unnoticed, something that had grown quietly over time. Waiting. The knocking stopped. The silence returned. But it didn't feel like before. It felt complete, like something had finished. I stood there in the dim light, barely breathing, my hands trembling at my sides, and slowly, without meaning to, I turned towards the broken floor, the dark below, the place where it had all started. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something pull at me. Not physically, not strongly, just enough, like an invitation or a reminder. I stepped closer, then stopped, because I understood now. This wasn't about the house, not anymore. It wasn't about the things outside or the ones below. It was about what had been carried out of it, what had been allowed to leave, and what it was waiting for. I backed away slowly, shaking my head. No, I whispered again. No, I'm not. But the words didn't finish because I heard it, not behind me, not below, from somewhere far away, a door, knocking. Then, a faint voice. Someone else. Somewhere else. My chest tightened because I knew that voice, not who it belonged to, but what it meant. Someone had heard it. Someone was standing at their door. Someone was about to make the same mistake, the same one I had, the same one I couldn't undo. I closed my eyes tightly, my breathing uneven. "Don't open it," I whispered. But my voice didn't reach them. It couldn't, because I wasn't there. I was still here, in that house, in that place, in between. And the knocking, it didn't stop. It never would. Because now I understood the truth Gareth never said. The house didn't trap anything. It passed it on. And I had already answered, long before I ever knew I had. If this story stirred something within you, be it a flicker of unease, curiosity, or deep reflection, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. What do you think is truly going on? Have you ever experienced a sense of uncanny familiarity like that before? If you have similar stories of your own, don't hesitate to share them. Who knows? Maybe we are all touching upon the same hidden frequency. And if you want to keep exploring these dramatic, mysterious, and multi-layered tales, please hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming chapters. Wishing you a truly peaceful night, where everything is still in the gentlest way, and may there always be a spark of warm light somewhere, waiting for you to find it.